So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Mr. Clayton Potter, a New Londoner, a Woodland manager, a neighbor, and a brilliant and wonderful human being who's bringing us really in-depth introduction and a deep dive into the wooded wonderland that is Bates Woods. Let's give a big round of applause for Clayton.
Not many people give better introductions than Frida. Thank you, Frida, Patrick, Amy, and Bates Friends Forever for letting me be here, for trusting me to share what I have learned and care about with respect to Bates Woods. It's definitely a bittersweet moment being in this room, surrounded by so many friends, because it's sweet because you're here and your friends and everybody's here is invested in Bates Woods. It's bitter because I know that a lot of you know much more about Bates Woods and forestry and certain things like that than I do. So I'll tell you a little bit about my journey as we get into my intro. But for the sake of tonight, my goals are really, I'll be doing this whole time, but my goals are to provide context around who I am, my woodland management plan, and kind of, I'll walk you through it. I'll walk you through some of my findings and recommendations. I'm not walking everybody through my 22-page plan. Don't worry about that. And I hope that by the end, I can leave you all with some considerations for thinking about how you want to manage Bates Woods in community, for community. So I'll share some more information about myself. We'll go over some key terms for the sake of this conversation, cover some Bates Woods history, which is already touched upon, so I won't have to spend too long there. We'll compare a forest management plan and my woodland management plan, some of my findings, and then again, how do we think about what's next and what we want to do 5, 15, 50 years from now. Okay, so Clayton Potter, native New Londoner. I was brought up through the public school systems here, and I grew up on Pleasant Street where my family home is. So, I don't know, 10-minute walk the long way to Bates Woods. I'd ride my bike there all the time, walk my dogs, go get lost in the woods when I was little. And it was always a special place to me. Where the access road is now, that green sky's put in, I remember when it was just mounds of dirt that were probably 15 feet high that I'd ride my bike off coming down from the meadow, and I'd get hurt repeatedly, but so I was always connected to Bates Woods in that way, kind of just going there on my own. Graduated from London High School in 2014, went to school in New York City, and that was not serene. I was in the city that had all of its perks, but I realized how much I was connected to nature just by growing up in New London and how I like to spend my time and what makes me feel good internally. So I find myself slipping off into Riverside Park, maybe enjoying an acre of forested land, still within earshot of all the traffic and people passing by and whatnot. But when I came home in 2019, I had recognized that I do need to have a connection to nature. I need to spend time in the woods. It is replenishing. It's important for my mental health. It's restorative. So I ended up going back to Bates Woods. I live on Press Street now. I bought my home through the Community Land Trust in 2020. So Bates Woods is still right there. And it's our largest public green space in New London. So that's where I end up spending a lot of my time. In 2020, I bought my home, started growing food in my yard that year, and then in about 2021, spending time in Bates Woods for some peace and quiet. I kind of noticed deer and would just see them and observe them from afar. And then one day I was walking in the meadow and I saw a trail through the dying mugwort in the fall. Kind of stepped on that, saw a scat, poop, and then kind of continued to just follow that trail. And eventually I ended up past the landfill, south past the landfill, and there's a little elevated rock outcrop climbed up that and spotted 5 does and sat there for about an hour and a half just watching them. And in that time, I thought about, wow, big game here in New London. And it occurred to me that if I learned how to hunt, I could harvest a deer and put food in my freezer and save money on meat in the same way that I am saving money on fresh vegetables and fruits by growing food in my garden. That kind of got me interested in hunting, which got me interested in wildlife biology, behavior, into wildlife habitat improvement, timber stand improvement. I was spending time on YouTube, going out in the woods all over the place. I bought land in New York with my partner and my brother in 2022. So I was thinking about managing that plot of land. And then in 2023, I learned about the Master Woodland Management Program offered through Connecticut Parks and Forest Association. And in 2024, I joined that program. It's a year-long certification program. I'll share a little bit more in a minute. And I just wrapped up that program in July. And part of that was I was required to produce a woodland management plan, and I did it on Woodlands. So getting into some terminology for the sake of this conversation, I'll be using the terms forest, woods, and woodland pretty interchangeably as I just talk about the space. As I talk about Bates Woods, I might say, you know, I was in Bates Woods the other day and I was thinking about the forest, and I'm kind of using that generally. Forestry, as a profession, according to the USDA, encompasses the science and practice of establishing, managing, using, and conserving forests, trees, and associated resources in a sustainable manner to meet desired goals, needs, and values. So that's forestry. You're getting hints because I left it up already, but I like this test. Does anybody want to try to define differences between conservation and preservation? It's tough.
Preservation is, as is, I believe, and conservation is to protect for perpetuity. It's the general concept we used in the 60s and 70s.
All right, preservation, protection as is, conservation, protection for future use.
Preservation is as it is, preserved as it is. And like for preservation sites, you wouldn't even remove invasives if it was a preserve.
There we go.
Conservation area, you manage the invasives, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
You can even timber in a conservation area if you have the right to timber. You can use it as a revenue stream.
Exactly. Thank you. Perfect. So, in my own words, conservation encompasses a range of human-led activities that promote a balanced ecosystem in ways that people can both enjoy and extract from that environment responsibly. Preservation is the practice of protecting an environment such that it continues to evolve in its natural course with little to no human influence. In kind of simpler terms, conservation involves the sustainable use and management of natural resources to benefit humans and wildlife. Preservation focuses on protecting nature from human use to maintain its current condition, but both aim to support wildlife, to support the environment. All right, now getting into the difference of a forester and myself, or a forest management plan and a woodland management plan. So this is really an important point of clarity. I don't know if there's formal definitions of a woodland manager. I think that really, that is the terminology that's used through the Connecticut Forest and Parks Association Woodland Manager Program, Master Woodland Manager Program. A forester is a licensed professional Their plans will reflect their expertise, and they're going to be very technical and go into a lot greater detail in far more areas than I covered in my woodland management plan. I covered some of the same topics that foresters and forest management plans will have, but again, not to the same extent or for the same purpose. So, in general, forest management plans, they vary case by case, but in general, they are very structured, analytical, and informational. And typically, you're going to hire a forester, ask somebody to do a forest management plan when you're going after grants, conducting master plans, or larger plans, and using that forest management plan as a means to an end. The way that I think about my woodland management plan, what I hope to do, the services I hope to offer, is to really be more action-oriented. Start with the property owner, think about their goals, and then focus the plan and explore the woods and glean what I need to with their goals in mind. For Base Friends Forever, you all did your due diligence in working with Chris and Sweet Birch, because he's going to kind of give you the best of both worlds. And I did this work parallel to Base Friends Forever getting started, and that's kind of how I ended up in this space. But Chris is going to offer a whole lot of valuable information that I can't even begin to touch. All right, so I'm gonna kind of get into, actually, I wanna talk a little bit about the Master Woodland Manager program to give them a shout out, because I had such a great experience over the last year. So it is through Connecticut Forest and Parks Association, a 1-year certificate program, and it consists, some of the minimal requirements include 20 hours of online learning, 35 hours of core learning requirements, 6 electives, you have to produce your woodland management plan, and do community outreach. It's so fun. It's the most fun educational experience I've had in my life. You're spending all of this time learning the science and practices of forestry alongside professionals with all backgrounds. They all have field experience. Some of them are focused in academia. Some are in the timber industries. Some are property owners. Others are passionate volunteers who have just been doing this for decades. It was $400 to participate. They have already closed the applications, I believe, for the upcoming year, but if you Googled Master Woodland Manager or went on the CFPA page, you can find information about the program, and I encourage folks to take it or to pass it along to a friend. It's a really good way to spend your weekends. If it sounds like a lot, it's very flexible. There's all types of courses and electives. What I shared, again, was the minimum, but there's hundreds and hundreds of hours of opportunities to be engaged. So just quick map so that we all have the same general orientation. I use these maps in my plans. Do you see this? Yeah, okay. This is north, south, I think you know the rest, east and west. And I'll stay here for a second. So I broke these areas up kind of for my own sense, but I'll give you a better view on the next slide. This is the southern portion of the park that is accessible now, thanks to Base Friends Forever, but most people never get this far. The landfill is here, and then you have kind of the main road, and I think that should orient most of us. And then something else I want to point out, for the sake of conversation and keeping it in the back of your head, is think about how dense the urban area is around Bateswoods. Just with respect to housing, along Laurel Ave, there's entire housing development along Laurel Ave right there. Then a lot of two-family and single families along Coleman Street. It immediately abuts the Boulder and Buchanan properties. On the west side, right across the street is Michael and Anthony Road. So that's 3 large housing developments, not including all the single and middle, that's a technical term, sorry, all the single and multifamily homes. And then the schools that are at the north. We have New London Public Schools, multi-magnet campus, and then Clark Lane Middle School in the west. These were terms that I used in my own head because they made sense to me as I was making my plan. And just kind of break up the different areas. So the open field and the landfill. Moving east, there's that small pond. It's hard to see the pond. There's a lot of cattails. Then you have the wooded my eastern woods. I'm not going to be referring to these terms, but the woods that come up right against Ashcraft. Then you have the whole north side of the park, which goes from kind of dry to very wet and swampy, back to dry, and increases in elevation towards you get to the dog pound. And then you have the west side of the woods, which is also it's a hardwood wetland. So Patrick kind of covered this slide in brief, which is awesome. Shout out to Patrick. So it hasn't been said yet, but this land is native land, Mohegan land. In 1912, the city purchased 100 acres of land from the Bates family homestead and was able to establish Bateswoods for $8,000. Patrick said about every 15 years, definitely every 10 to 15 years at least, there are new grassroots organizations, individuals, peoples, community groups that are saying, hey, we need to be taking better care of Bateswoods and taking more advantage of this property. So between the city bought it in 1912, I think in 1917, people were starting to say, hey, we need to do something. So everybody from high schoolers, Boy Scouts, the Day newspaper, Chamber of Commerce, the Williams Memorial Institute, Lions Clubs, all sorts of groups of people have been doing this for 100 years, over 100 years now. And by 1952, at the latest, the city was dumping 60 to 80 tons of solid waste per day in the swamp, and that figure, that 60 to 80 tons, is found in a report in the Bay that was noted after there were zoning changes to the south. So there was a lot of essentially construction happening, development happening, moving south, and they were kind of just taking that, running it back into the woods and dumping it. In 1960, the Herbert Moran Zoo opened. There's plenty of stories about that I have not had the luxury of experiencing. But then in 77 and 79, just to kind of point out that there was some action happening, the city, the Parks and Rec Department did commission a master plan, a recreation master plan for Bateswoods in 1977. And then the environmental review team produced a report on the property in 1979. By 84, the state was encouraging or really pushing us to close that landfill, cap it off, but it did not happen until 1990, 1991. I see in my research, Deep ordered the landfill closed in 1990. but I understand it wasn't closed until 91. I only brought us up to the 90s for the focus of like my woodland management plan essentially. But 10 to 15 year timeline, right? The same stuff has happened now. More people have kind of called to reinvest in base woods, and finally over the last 3 years, 4 years, there's been a lot of serious attention, and of course the efforts of Base Friends Forever brought us all into this space tonight. So I will kind of start getting into my woodland management plan and my findings. So some areas that I covered in my plan, very, very briefly: geology and soil, the forest type, stage and age, structural diversity, and I think that that's a typo, of course. But these are general sections you would find in any forest management plan. And part of the program as well was kind of, taking our plans based off our passions. So I focused a lot more on wildlife throughout my report. You'll kind of see that reflected, but tonight I'll mostly talk about forest type, stage and age, and structural diversity, so that we can start thinking about what we want so we can understand why the forest is how it is, and think about how we want it to be. So has everybody in here been to Bates Woods?
Yes.
All right, cool. So we all know how rough and rocky it is, but that it's super green and it's wet, and there's so much happening.
It's terribly toxic too. No, it's not toxic.
What are you, like the soil, water? What are you
I'm
asking?
not aware the state of Connecticut ever taking water samples to test the toxicity, but it's a vast wetland. Vast wetland.
Yeah.
It's a mile long wetland.
Yep. Yes. Exactly.
Most of it's impenetrable. And the reason the state took action, and we wanted to resist it, was because of the toxicity and the liability. You have a public park with toxicity in it. So that toxicity will remain a liability issue for the city of New London, I believe. The reason they may have put the solar capping on it was to keep human beings off of the most toxic location in Bates Woods, which is the mound. They're called mount trash bars. They're all over the United States, and that's the nickname was given to them in the 70s, mount trash bars. They're everywhere.
Mount Trashmores.
Yes,
So
and you're not aware of that.
I can't speak to the basis of to the validity of if that's the strategy that was used to keep people out, or to prevent the city from being required to remediate waters. But it's consistent with a lot of the research and with kind of just the history and the lack of investment or remediation. I did not do any soil tests or water tests as part of my report. The information I'll share kind of around geology and soil is secondhand. It's from reports in the Environmental Review Team report, as well as some of the information from the Recreation Master Plan that was done in '77, because there was forestry elements as part of that plan. So, geology. Bates Woods is super rocky and has all these outcrops and is hilly because of glacial tilt. So as the iceberg moved over the land, it deposited rocks and stones and boulders all over the place, and that kind of shaped the terrain and topography that we see today. With the bedrock being so prominent, the soils are pretty shallow. The soils are sandy loam or stony loam. But when you get into the wetlands, they get a little bit deeper, much more silty, and there's a lot more organic matter because of the swampy wetlands and whatnot. That's as far as I can go into geology and soil.
Right on.
Just doing my due diligence.
Good.
So the forest type, this is where I get a little more comfortable. It is an oak hickory forest, and that is, the forest type is defined based off of the most popular species that are dominating the canopy. So we see red and white oaks all over Bates Woods. It's a actually I'll talk about that next time. The secondary forest type would be maple beech birch. There's enough established maple beech birch trees that you can see that they will be the next species to succeed the oaks. They're the species that are in the understory and will succeed the oaks should there be a catastrophic event that knocks those down. Not to say that there's not other species in the forest. There's hundreds. A 2003 BioBlitz through Yukon found 1,694 species of flora and fauna in, I think, a 72-hour period, I believe. So yeah, I mean, tree species that stand out to me that I came across: sweet birch, yellow birch, sassafras. I didn't know that sassafras grew into such a tall tree until I started looking at it around Bates Woods. Eastern white pine, hornbeam or ironwood, black cherry, all sorts. So, forest stage. So, the age of the forest is generally, of these oaks and hickories, is generally 60 to about 120 years old. And it's a two-age forest. So, I took this out of the 1979 Environmental Review Team report because it verifies that what they saw then is influencing exactly what we see now. So they have each area broken off by stands. So A's are mixed hardwood stands. There's some small B stands, which are hardwood swamps. And C's are mixed hardwoods. The A's are oak hickory. B, which is the swampy areas, are at that time, so again, this is in 79. The B was a hardwood swamp with maple, ash, and birch dominating. C it was a oak stand with pole-sized oaks. In this report, pole size was 11 inches at least. Terminology. Saplings, very, very small trees, way down here. Seedlings, getting taller, about 1 inch to 5 inches in diameter. Poles, 5 inches to 11 inches and up. Logs, timber logs, saw logs. Accurate, right? Cool, thank you. See, I'm not alone. I know I have friends in the room. So it's just interesting to look at this map. I'm walking around Bates Woods without this information, and I'm trying to figure out how old these trees are. Looking at the diameter of a tree is not always the most accurate way to tell age, because of a bunch of different factors, so it's kind of rough estimates. So as I'm walking around the woods, I'm seeing most of the trees are about 11 to 18 inches. They're all oaks. Then maybe for every 5 trees that are that 11 to 18 inch size, there's going to be one that is 18 to 30 inches. They're going to be a lot bigger, much older, much more mature tree. So when I'm doing my report and coming back to this, and I read the Environmental Review Team report from 79, in the same stands, in all the same locations, the trees that were saplings and poles in 79 are the 11 to 18 inch size trees that we see today. The logs, the timber-sized trees that were 11 to 18 inches in 79 are 18 plus inches today. So we're seeing kind of two ages, two generations of predominantly oaks that are between 60 and 120 years old. So getting into structural diversity. When we're thinking about structural diversity or diversity within a forest, we're thinking about diversity of age, species, and sizes or spread. And I like to kind of include spread and distribution as well. This photo is not of basswoods, it's of some coniferous forest. I have it cited in the left. But it's dark. Can you see this? How well can you all see? Okay. So this is a textbook example because starting from the forest floor, it's covered, it has some grasses, mosses, some seedlings of these conifers. You can see a dead log over here on the forest floor, which is important. So when we're also thinking about structural diversity, we're not just thinking about what's alive, we're thinking about really everything that is in that environment. Moving up from the forest floor, there's plenty of saplings right here. Then you can obviously see that there's trees of different ages and sizes. So in the understory, there's some that are coming right up here. Plenty that go out of the frame and make up the main canopy. But the canopy is also open and letting plenty of sunlight down and onto the forest floor, allowing for continued growth and evolution. The next slides. So if this is a kind of textbook diverse, structurally diverse forest, I'm going to go through a few different photos of base woods, and I want folks to just kind of shout out what they see.
Rocks.
Rocks.
Very thin soil, nothing growing at all on the ground.
No
Extremely
understory.
thin soil.
No understory, thin soil,
Campfire.
rocks, oaks. Oaks.
It's a nice lichen.
Same size trees, lichen, yep. All right,
Dead trees are on the ground.
thank you.
More dead stuff.
Karen,
More
amend that
dead.
one to the soil.
Yeah.
Dead trees are on the ground, yeah.
Is it a hickory or an oak?
And so this is the, this first photo that we looked at is on the northeast part of the woods. So if you entered from Ashcraft and then you kind of took that first right, that first trail just past the swamp, that's where you're at.
The largest tree in Bates Woods is very close to that shot right there. Could you see the standing oak in there? There's only one in the whole area. A massive standing oak that was left there. Farmers used to live in there. It's called standing oak.
I'm not exactly sure.
About 6 feet in diameter.
I'll not find it. Thank you, Arthur. What else we got?
Still no understory.
Beach? Beach.
Hmm?
Oh, we're supposed to call them up. Do we know?
Hickory.
Leaves.
Dead ash on the ground.
There we go.
Lots of leaves.
Oops, sorry.
Rock wall.
And think about like in this photo, how far can you
You
see?
can see really far. Yeah.
That's why the deer hunters almost went from there. It's a very popular deer hunting area.
It's fall or winter, so you can see through
No, I got you. Some spring
Now
shade.
is that
Sorry, I'm sorry.
summer
One more
story?
time. It's fall or winter, so.
the, yeah, so you can see through the forests. During the summer, you're not going to be able to see through. So,
With this particular stand, I beg to differ.
It's very thin.
It's thin, so in the summer, I don't have this exact shot in the summer. The canopy is full, and there won't be too much sunlight reaching the forest floor. But as a human, we can see pretty well. these trees will have leaves on them, but even so,
Be up high.
they'd be generally up high and it wouldn't be too thick.
Oh.
Some seasonal changes. What are we seeing?
Got some understory. Shrubberies.
But still mostly thin trees.
Oh, mostly thin trees. We got some snags, standing dead trees, and I think from this perspective, you can kind of see the forest changing as well. So we have edge habitat with a lot of different shrubs and invasives right here. A nice dead snag. You can see we have different size trees, but then you can also see that further in the back, the forest is thinning. It's clearly thick. There's a lot of greenery up front, but in the back you can start to see. Oh, I see a bunch of trees, but it's still very open. There's a lot of sunlight hitting the forest floor. And sunlight hitting the forest floor in the background, but not a lot growing in the forest floor.
Nature adapting to our garbage.
Right. So continuing with this exercise, this is over. It would be on the western side of the pond, where you're kind of, if you're on the trail, you go over the footbridge, and you kind of stay on the left side of that pond. Well, if you stay to your left and you're on the side of the pond, that's about where the image on the left was taken. And right there, you can see that there actually is a lot of diversity right there. We have different plant species, we have the forest open, and as you're moving from, I took that photo on the trail facing the swamp, so it's really, that's probably like 10 to 15 yards wide of edge habitat. So it's going from the trail, you have different shrubs, grasses, herbaceous layers, and then if you move in, you're gonna have some trees coming up, and then eventually you'll hit the swamp. So it's kind of a transition area that is getting a lot of sunlight and has a lot of diversity. And then 20, 30 yards down that trail after I took this picture, I saw a bird's nest. And I thought that it's interesting that, once you start to see these healthy habitats right away, what do we find? Animals. And adapting to, yes, somebody's adapted to the use of our garbage. Yeah, incorporating, doing their part to clean up basewoods and replace materials.
Thank you, buds.
Yeah.
A little waterproof there.
So I was saying this out loud, I think, but when we're thinking about structural diversity, we're kind of looking at the forest in layers of the forest. I included 5, sometimes there's up to 7. Starting with the forest floor, and now I'm kind of talking about just basewoods at large, like the woodlands of basewoods. The forest floor is primarily leaf litter. It's oak leaves that take long times to decompose and have just kind of been stacking up for years. You're going to find some grasses in certain areas and some moss. The herbaceous layer, primarily multiflorals. If you're walking through the woods, you're getting pricked and snagged by all these winding vines that are pretty invasive, but they thrive in the shade, so that's what's there. In some places you'll find like brambles, like wild raspberry bushes or thorns, but not too often, certainly not as often as the multiflorals. Shrub layer, we can start to include our maple and beech seedlings. Mountain laurel and sassafras are super popular around edge habitats, but if you go into the woodlands, then you're starting to lose mountain laurel and sassafras. So the understory is primarily the maple and beech saplings and poles at that point. And then again, the canopy is red and white oaks. So, thinking in particular about the forest floor and regeneration, one of my recommendations is to increase the structural diversity of the forest in stages. So, thinking about it's an oak stand. All the oaks are about the same age, and they're all mature at this point. In Connecticut, most of you probably know that our oaks, well, it's not just Connecticut, but the Northeast region has been suffering from sponging moth disease, which is attacking and killing our oaks. And then in Connecticut, in the last 2 years, we've had record numbers of wildfires. So those are two climatic events that are very pertinent threats to our forest. Like our forest at large, but our forest, Bates Woods, because it's all oaks. So one fire or seeing sponging moth come through can take away our woods pretty much completely right now because it's not a diverse forest. So one of my recommendations is increasing the structural diversity for both age and species. So I think that in some areas, we should open up the canopy, cut down a few trees to let the light in, let more light hit the forest floor for oak regeneration, so that we're starting to see younger oaks and encouraging them to come up for that next generation of oaks. With that in mind, the forest oaks cannot grow in their own shade, and that forest floor you can kick up leaves for a long time. So those would both need to be addressed in order to allow the acorns that are there to grow. And then deer browse would have to be managed because they're gonna destroy all the baby oaks. But I want to see more oak trees starting to come up, new oak trees. And then I also want to encourage that secondary forest, the maple beeches, to be able to grow and thrive. So in that eastern portion of the woods, like right off of Ashcraft, there is a stand of sapling size red maples. And they're there, and it's like, okay, this is, when I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is clearly primed to go. That's a place where I would want to maybe cut a couple oaks and then decrease the competition for some of those maples to establish themselves. I meant to mention it earlier in that in the environmental review team report. B, the hardwood swamps were, no, I'm sorry, stand A, what is now all oak, used to, the dominant tree of the canopy was red maple. So, thinking about the cycles of the forest, if we go into our stands that have some red maple present, some sweet birch present, maybe open up the canopy, we can encourage them to grow. We know we'll keep some oaks there, and eventually those will reach they'll be the emergent species again, but we can encourage these natural cycles. Again, my interest is in wildlife habitat improvement, so I kind of focus my plan in that regard. But I think that the wildlife habitat improvement goals also align with the structural diversity goals, and they all kind of feed into each other. So I think about encouraging improvements that benefit habitat for particularly white-tailed deer, New England cottontail, and songbirds. For our native species, well, these are all like different sizes and types and classes of animals, but they're local, they're native, and they share habitats and benefit from each other's habitats. So kind of supporting one, kind of help out the others. And that will really come with forest structure, but it also, I guess it's chicken and the egg, but for me, it's the fun spot in terms of thinking about when to bring in and what types of native plants to bring in. Our berry bushes, like high bush blueberry, serviceberry, what else do I have? Serviceberry, witch hazel, more sassafras, like encourage that sassafras, American cranberry, sumac, those can all be conducive. A lot of those actually existed in Bates Woods in the 70s and can be found in those reports. So that's also another way to kind of think about, well, what do we want here? Well, what's been here? And we can kind of work in that regard. But all those are great for wildlife and for creating structural diversity in the forest. And then the meadow, that we miss now. I'd love to see that be replaced. So we can think of it as an opportunity for improvement, because that meadow was also really just like cardboard. It wasn't a beautiful native wildflower meadow. But now that if we're thinking about how we can create a space like that, then it's an opportunity to do it the right way. And then I also just think it's pretty important to continue to clean the waters in the wetlands and encourage herbaceous growth there, because Bates Woods is home to Fanger Brook, which is the headwaters for Alewife Cove, and ultimately drains into Long Island Sound. So kind of just start at the top, take care of our waters, and that'll have other benefits throughout the ecosystem. Not my area of expertise, but easy to walk around Bates Woods and smell sulfur sometimes, and be able to point out that this needs a little bit of care. You all know this, but what's the value of Bates Woods? I'm sure we've all enjoyed it for most of these reasons up here, but the question on the right is really what I hope people can think about. How else can it be valuable? And I'm going to kind of leave you with this definition of sustainable forestry, because I think that I appreciate the definition, and I think it aligns with Bates Friends Forever's group goals. And I wanted to leave the last photo from.
Yes, there it was.
So sustainable forestry, a holistic conservation effort based on environmental balance and health that helps ensure forests are managed in ways that have the potential to meet the social, physical, and economic needs of the present while ensuring similar options for the future. So what are our options in 5, 15, 50 years? How would you like Bates Woods? How would you like the forest to look? And what would you like to be able to do? Or what services would you like to be able to enjoy? And I'm not going to make that an exercise, because I think there's more to come. But that's kind of where I want to leave you.
Thank you, Clayton. That was great, right? Wasn't it exciting? We learned a lot. We saw some inspiring pictures. So we have about a half hour left as a big group. We have this room until 8, but we don't want to take all of your time. So this kind of next section for the next half hour is kind of a combination. Specific questions for Clayton about what was presented, and kind of getting at some of the questions that were posed, right? Like that kind of conversation questions around where we want to see Bates Woods in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So if we can kind of do both of those things at the same time, we could. Maybe I'd like to see a show of hands of people who have questions, real specific questions for Clayton about what was presented, just to kind of see that. So I see Allison's hand. Any other? And Pat's hand. So why don't we'll take those questions, and maybe there'll be like 2 more, and then we'll kind of go into this visioning, kind of loving on Bates Woods kind of section. And I'll invite Kate up. We have some butcher paper, and we'll just sort of take people's ideas and kind of respond to one another in that. So Allison, Patrick, and then we'll see if maybe those 2 questions stimulate a couple more. So go ahead, Allison.
I just wanted to ask you to explain, I didn't catch what you said, the shot of the meadow. Does that derive from something from its past, or?
So this is the shot from the meadow. So the meadow is the landfill.
Okay.
And now it's the solar field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I know that there's maps around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, so I really appreciate talking about the diversity that the woods needs. And I guess I'm curious, I don't know if you have any stories or examples of other places that have wanted to do that. Like functionally, how do they do it? Is it a volunteer-based group like this? Like, do we go and is it something that would happen over a 2-year period? Kind of, what do you know about the process of how groups like ours might kind of affect the woods in a positive way when it comes to that kind of diversity of trees and?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're on the exact right track. And a lot of times when I would go out on these trips through the program, it was maybe if it was a land trust property, it'd be folks from the land trust. If somebody wasn't an expert with a chainsaw or forestry or something like that, they'd have somebody like that there. And volunteers from the land trust and students who would, kind of just be doing the work. So I think really the goal setting part is primary, hands secondary, and then nature's going to take its course, and it's going to change will happen pretty quickly. So I mean, once you start, if you give it the right conditions, if we go and cut an oak down in a stand right now and just bring more sunlight onto the forest floor where there's nothing, no other stimulus, then not much is going to change. There'll be a little bit more sunlight coming through. But if you're intentional and we make sure that, in this example, we clear out the forest floor in one way, expose some of those acorns and some of that ground, open up the canopy, and that might mean cutting down one tree. It doesn't mean, you got to go and take out an acre of trees to be able to start regenerating this forest. It might just be a couple of trees and you're kind of building patches, or you're focusing on edge habitat. And so like right now, if I had to say what's the easiest and fastest way to create edge habitat in Bates Woods, I would say to continue tearing up these invasives along the path. There's already sunlight because of that open path. There's already plenty of sunlight coming in. So that's going to let those sassafras grow, mountain laurel. I would plant other native species, but pretty quickly you'll start to have different layers, Right now, there's definitely a shrub layer. Then we're kind of missing an understory, like thinking about moving from the road, and we're looking at the edge. You have a shrub layer, then there's no real understory. It's just open woods all of a sudden. So I may be like transitioning in that because animals want edge habitat for breeding, hiding, nesting, moving from one area to another. So they don't happen fast. And I think that you're doing all the right things.
So is Bates Woods a conservation area, or is it deemed anything like that, or is it just a public woods, or does it have any vocabulary that goes along with how to approach a space?
Yeah, so I would definitely take input from others, but my understanding is that it's not protected in any way, like it's not a huge conservation space. It's just open space. In terms of like zoning terms, it's just open space.
I have a follow-up question. How does a forest start to function in this way without that mid-story? Like, if you compare it to like AV Tract or some of Waterford Land Trust hiking areas, why do we see more of an understory in those areas and not really Bates Woods?
Just kind of the history of what does and doesn't happen. So, without any intervention, if I did this exercise kind of trying to think back to what they saw in the 79 report. They're listing multiple species on every layer of the forest, and it was a red maple stand. So those oaks were present. Eventually the oaks grew, shaded everything out, outgrew the maples. Now, all of those species that were thriving because there was an open canopy and there was some less competition, now have a lot more competition and are going to start to eventually kind of just be replaced by species that are more shade tolerant, and because those oaks grew and dominated the canopy, and oaks can't grow under their own shade, we get stuck with oaks.
I really appreciate everything you presented here, and I agree with you about what you're saying right there. But one of the things you mentioned early on that I kind of question is you mentioned restoring habitat for wildlife, including deer.
Mm-hmm.
And my understanding is that deer are one of, other than the shade of the large oak trees and the canopy that's coming, is that the deer are preventing new growth from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Deer also are not eating Japanese knotweed, and they're not eating multiflora rose. So I'm curious why you've selected that in terms of something to encourage, because it just seems like there's going to be a lot of other challenges to get, like after we do a bunch of restoration maybe and this forest starts going, where will the next generation come from if we're really encouraging the deer? And I know it's a little bit more theoretical, because how are we going to keep the deer out unless you really are hunting there?
Where will the next generation of oaks come from?
Or where will the next generation of any understory come from if we have too many deer in the woods?
Yeah. So the reason why I think that increasing structural diversity with an eye towards wildlife management, in particular deer, is good, because it gives us the opportunity to reintroduce a lot of native plants that provide food for all different types of animals at different times of the year. So more food availability for all the animals and more animals. With respect to deer, yes, managing deer in Bates Woods is going to be extremely difficult. Deer destroy oaks. They don't eat the multiflora rose, and there's limited resources or a lot of opportunities for creativity in terms of how we keep deer out of a particular area when we're trying to encourage oak regeneration. So in some places in Connecticut, like, and that I learned about, they utilize slash walls. So you're cutting down, you're already trying to regenerate oaks, you're cutting down a whole bunch of oaks and a whole bunch of brush and everything to create a nice open area. And then you take all of that material and you create 10-foot high walls around that area. Keeps the deer out. Creates incredible change in a year.
Huh.
We don't really have enough material or access to be able to move all that material around. So I think hunting would be important for managing the deer population. And the deer are also going to eat it. So I think it kind of makes more sense to create habitat that supports them and allows them to spread out and utilize different parts of the park than leave them with what they have, keep the level of competition that they have, and they continue to add stress on what is there because they're trying to work with what they got too. So, yeah. Most answers to these sorts of questions are, it depends. And this is just my perspective.
I just add one thing on the deer. The deer are not permanently they're not just staying in Bates Woods. They're traveling over to Stanger Farm, the Waterford area. If it's a real bad winter, they come up onto my street and they'll eat shrubs and they'll eat holly, they'll eat arborvitae. So that deer population, you could have another 20 or 30 deer come from another section of Waterford into that deer they're not necessarily home to that park. I don't believe.
So
they're traveling all over.
Yes and no. Yes, deer are traveling and using the range that you described. And deer won't really travel far if they have the resources necessary. So a lot of those deer are sitting in Bates Woods. I can walk in Bates Woods and go find deer often in about the same places. And knowing where they'll be based on the time of year and availability of resources. So they're there, and they're there often. Yeah.
Thanks. I just have a quick question. It might be for the organization as a whole. So we know that once you open up space to sunlight, invasives also grow there. And I know you got a grant for invasive control. Was that the purpose to combine those two initiatives, or is the invasive control in another area in Bates Woods?
The invasives are predominantly along the road where the sunlight is greatest, but the invasive control is throughout the entire forest. And predominantly because the way that the request was written, it's a lot of removing vines from trees specifically.
And we knew we were kind of, in some sense, jumping the gun and getting these two grants at one, that we were sort of doing something and planning at the same time. But we talked to DEP people about that, and we're really encouraged to kind of do both and I think the fact that the solar field was going in and kind of changing the forest and the kind of the whole park for us. Also, DEP saw, the opportunity to kind of, that the plan would catch up to the invasive work that was already happening. And I guess the other thing just to mention here is that in addition to the, another place where a lot of invasives happen is where the water department needs access to parts of the woods, right? So they maintain a massive pipe to bring reservoir water into the city, and they kind of do whatever they've got to do to maintain that access. And their roads and their access points are big sort of invasive vector kind of areas. So we have a relationship with the water department, and hopefully they see us as friendly people in there. But that'll be an ongoing challenge too. This is this isn't just a woods, it's not just a forest, it's an urban forest, and like the evidence, the kind of disruption that comes along with this, with all of that.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to boost your desire to support oaks. I think that's very exciting, and like oaks are so important to wildlife. I mean, just like caterpillars alone, I think it's like 600 species of caterpillars are supported by our oak trees in Connecticut. And I know you mentioned wildfire, and oaks are also a fire-adapted species. Their bark and their seeds are developed in a way to be resistant to fire and helped by fire. They help the soil for oaks. So all of this makes your forest more resilient to changes in the future, possible changes, because who knows what's going to happen. So that's great.
Great, thanks, Beth. So we can maybe shift now if there are no more questions specifically for Clayton, or one last one, to this kind of next step for our last 15 minutes of formal togetherness. Fred, did you have one more question?
No, actually, I think a nice fire would be beneficial to the whole woods. It would. But there's areas where I've been working on the first trail. What's it called?
We call it Fred's Trail. Oh, Jack.
But on the right-hand side, there's nothing ever going to grow there, any trees, if you don't get rid of it's like fields of knotweed and briars, and so I didn't slowly working at it, but you don't clear that out, you're never going to get anything to grow except knotweed. Because it just blocks out everything there is.
Like Rita was just saying, there's also timing.
Actually,
if you get rid of those invasive, you also got to replace something real quick. Yeah.
Well, you just got to keep the knotweed down, and something will grow. Hopefully, you plant something that will grow. But
So what are 3 plants you'd like to see planted to replace specifically the dying beech trees? Because we have lots of beech trees that are dying. It's going to open up a lot of sunlight for things. What are 3 things you'd like to see planted in those kind of areas?
I don't think I have an answer to exactly swap in those areas. You think about like in the wetland areas.
There's abundance of wetlands, yeah.
Service. Like my first would probably be service area.
Spice bush? Did I hear spice bush?
Spice bush, is that the spice bush from firebush? No,
Huckleberries. Huckleberries.
Tulip trees?
What were we talking about?
how about
Pawpaw.
Pawpaw!
Yes.
how about black walnut?
Ooh, I like black walnut.
Yeah, that way you have the fruit, nuts that's beneficial to
Witch hazel.
Which
Hybrid chestnuts.
hybrid chestnuts?
American cranberry.
Cranberry, yeah. Perfect cranberry.
That's
Can I say US cranberry?
More tuberose? Yes.
Cool.
Oops, that's a nice looking list there. Sorry, what? I'm sorry, I didn't get it.
The native dogwood,
Okay,
is one of canadensis.
fruit trees. Apple trees. Apple trees.
Catbush?
Shad.
Shad, like the fish, shad bush. And then Fred is saying fruit trees.
Yeah, that would be, there's some apple trees there. A deer.
Sweet fern.
Sweet fern. That sounds nice.
It is nice. That one's dry sunny though, not, but, okay, you can have.
Okay, yeah, we don't have a lot of dry sunny, do we?
But like the edges of the meadow.
Uh-huh.
I guess it's something like that.
Yep. Fruit fern, dry, sunny.
You guys some milkweed for the butterflies?
Milkweed.
Asters, native asters.
And the asters.
And we know what type of plants will help naturally detoxify the area. I know black walnuts will kill things, like they are.
That's a great.
There's other plants that will help revitalize. There are plants that will help revitalize, and there are other plants that are very selfish.
Yes, yes. So Kate's writing that down because we know that sunflowers pull toxins out of the soil. Did somebody say black walnut does that too?
No, black walnut retards growth.
Retards other, right.
Sunflowers also retard other growth, but they do
Pull garbage out.
they do help pull the toxins out.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. Bud Bray was talking about how toxic Bates Woods is.
Yes.
And he's right? Like the material, it wasn't just the construction material, it was also incinerator ash that was dumped in the swampland that became the landfill. And just, they'd set tires on fire, kind of on a regular basis. Public Works would set the tires on fire, and then the neighbors would call the fire department, and
Marshmallows.
the fire department would yell at Public Works for doing this. This is all through the 70s, and so the leaching off, the water still runs underneath of the landfill, and the water on the other side is very, very ugly. So that is what kind of flows down into Alewife Cove and into the Long Island Sound. So we have talked about testing the water. Kate's done a bunch of work trying to figure all that out, but it's one of those things that hasn't happened yet, maybe costs a lot of money. We're not sure what to do with the results. Please.
In regards to like the bodies of water in Bates Woods, there's like 3 major like ponds or lakes. Did you ever consider that in your forest management plan?
As like their role essentially, or
Yeah, or like the future outlook or like going forward with them.
yeah. So I did not include like water remediation or mitigation as part of like my top 3 focuses in my report, just because personal interests, but it is easy to replace that into the top 3. I think for the reasons Frida just described and the connections of the water table, it's necessary. And my plan and my goals were for Clayton and Clayton's interests. In community, I would voice more for, water remediation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I just want to say real quick, I think like out of the plants that you named, native asters, sweet fern, witch hazel, cranberry, tupelos, dogwood, I'm not sure what, viburnum and spicebush, and serviceberry and milkweed were all named in the 79 report. So a lot of, what you came up with should be was there.
One of the things that were just on the water, the kind of biggest body of water in Bates Woods is about a 6-acre pond that is invisible, like kind of absent, largely because of Phragmites, and it's just clogged. But Fred and Tom Shook and other, kind of people who grew up here who are a little older remember being able to ice skate from like near Coleman Street and Warren Street all the way down through the woods along streams and then into this big 6-acre pond. It's definitely outside of the scope of our volunteer efforts to rehabilitate that body of water, but it's on like the kind of long list, or the 20-year list. Heather, who I thought would be here tonight, was just like, just go start digging it up and see what happens. Like, after you, Heather. But I guess you can also put a pesticide inside of each single straw of the Phragmites, and it will kill it. But you have 6 acres, maybe 4. I think there's a little bit of water in the middle still there. But that was kind of a managed pond, right? We can see evidence that it was dammed, before it got too cold, so that it would be a nice place for people to skate. And there's this skate hut, which great Base Friends Forever volunteers have completely made naked. It had a beautiful coat of poison ivy and prickers, and they've denuded it in this beautiful, I'm sure consensual way. And so it's near what we call the dog leg, as you come down the hill. If you come in by Ashcraft, and come down the hill and then make that sharp right, you can see the stone house and then these 2 cisterns made of stone that they've also uncovered. And so, anyway, it's yeah. And we were like, "Where's the pond?" And it's like, it's through there.
Well, what I just add on to that is, within the history, right, we didn't necessarily talk about who built the stoneworks. And so New London had a local version of the Civilian Conservation Corps during the Great Depression. And they're the ones who built the skate hut, and they built the stone bridge that goes over the stream, and 7 different camping/picnic sites that are throughout the woods that have been overgrown. And so, yeah, we've reached out to the New London Landmarks. They've come out to the park with the group, and the idea of kind of reclaiming some of those spaces to be approachable and to be community. We're talking about the health of the woods here, but also the functionality, right? This is a public park, so how do we get the public into the park? And it's by making these things nice. It's by making it approachable. It's by knowing that you can go there and have a nice afternoon with your kids.
Maggie?
One of your questions at the end, what else do we want to see here? Education.
Yeah.
That's something that wasn't on your list, I don't think. And there are schools galore right around the site, and I don't think very many of them make use of Bates Woods. And if the school kids were out there with their teachers learning about the importance of trees and forests, we would have the next generation of urban foresters thinking about these things too.
Besides outdoor education opportunities.
Well, I wanted to ask something. You brought up about the schools. When I was at London High, back
A few years ago.
in 70, biology class, we used to go into Bates Woods to go into the second pond and run around that. But if you were involved, you got this 2 magnet schools in London High, get them involved.
And Clark Lane from the Waterford side.
Right. And which they should be connected to the park too, because part of the land there is, the forest area, the non-leased area back of the fields that Clark Lane is attached.
Hill Trail. Hill Trail goes to Clark Lane.
So if folks know educators at Clark Lane or at New London High who want to do this, we've had teachers from adult continuing ed in the park who want to do stuff. Conn College folks have been there. Mitchell young people have been there too. But yeah, kind of making a tighter relationship with New London High School is definitely on our 2-year plan. Instead of our 20-year plan. So we'd love recommendations about that. It is 7:30. I just want to mark that. I want to get maybe just a couple last comments or questions. Go ahead.
I think you mentioned camping sites. I think that would be a cool way to introduce people are usually inside on their phones or doing other stuff indoors. I feel like that would be a cool way to bring people outside. And it's not really too rural where people are hiking 3 miles out, where it's a 10-minute walk into a camping site. I think that would be a cool way to introduce city people to the forest, and including people the high schoolers. It could be a nice overnight trip or a senior trip. That could be a nice idea to take the kids out.
You feel the energy here? People love that idea. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. People used to sleep, camp in the park maybe in the 50s and 60s, but it's been that long. Yeah, Jay?
We were hiking there one time and we saw some folks bouldering. And I thought that'd be a cool club or activity that every once in a while get people to go through there, learn how to boulder.
Yeah.
As long as you have the mats.
Yeah. Yeah, Bates Woods is on kind of lists for the Northeast of great places to boulder. And so you do see intrepid people carrying their mats all that way and heading to that one kind of beautiful outcrop right there. But maybe they're, yeah. Yeah. There's also geocache now in Bates Woods. And so if you're into that sort of thing, you can find the geocache there.
Sorry, one more comment.
Yeah.
All trails, a lot of people I know use that. That would be cool to get some of the newer trails, the Popsicle Trail or some other little ones.
Yeah.
To get maybe not even people from London, but out and get more attention.
Right on. Yeah.
We've actually submitted them all to All Trails, but it just turns into a black hole. I don't know how to get it to be moved to actually be available to people. So if anyone knows, let me know, because they've all been submitted.
We're also sort of imagining, and actually not imagining, Amy and Kate have cleared a trail and sort of established a trail from the Boulders neighborhood down into the park, and there's a little sign there welcoming people into the park, and we'd love to do more outreach there and sort of, encourage people to go beyond the dumpsters and come into the woods. There's nothing, there wasn't anything there that said, hey, there's this, your backyard is this extraordinary woods. And we imagine in the future having the maps there and an interpretation sign and something that really welcomes people in. So maybe Brad and then Emily.
I was
Uh-huh.
I was wondering if we could do any sort of speaking to education, plaques or something to talk about the trees and the ones that are native to the environment and the beneficial uses.
It's a great idea. Well, I don't want to hold people. As I said, we have this room until 8, and we got to clean up. Please take food home if there is any food left. If you want to support Bates Friends Forever, you can buy t-shirts, you can give us cash, you can donate by Venmo. That all helps us. Please fill out the surveys. Either if you finish your paper one, you can give them, just leave them back on the table there. Give them to Karen. Share the QR code with your friends. We'd love a lot robust response here. And thank you all really so much for coming tonight, and thank you, Clayton, for this great conversation.